When international travel to the U.S. fell last year, many blamed the so-called Trump slump, arguing that the president's low approval ratings overseas are to blame for the drop in tourism.
Turbulence in the relationship between Canada and the U.S. continues to drive down travel to the U.S.
Comes for vacation, I think there's other places I would rather go.
The crowds are thinning, the terminals growing quieter, and the numbers are painting a grim picture. Nearly 40% fewer Canadian tourists crossed into the U.S. last month alone. Over 3 million international travelers have disappeared in just a matter of weeks, stripping the country of more than $21 billion in potential revenue. Where passport control once buzzed with energy, there's an eerie stillness. From Las Vegas to New York, the ripple is unmistakable. Hotels, airports, and businesses that once thrived on foreign foot traffic are now bracing for impact. And it didn't start overseas. It started with a decision made in Washington. A string of policies, from trade moves to visa shakeups, sent shock waves through an industry that once seemed untouchable. So what turned the world's top destination into a place tourists are now skipping over? And what happens when they don't come back? Stick around until the end. The collapse came quietly, but its impact has been anything but subtle. Flights between Canada and the United States, once the busiest cross-border routes in North America, have been hollowed out. By late March 2025, bookings on these routes had plunged by 70% compared to the year before. Airlines, faced with rows of unsold seats, stripped more than 320,000 seats from their schedules through October. Then came the government's advisories. On April 4th, Canada's Foreign Ministry issued a formal warning, urging citizens to think twice before heading south. Concerns about harsh screenings and shifting rules at the border took over the headlines. Within days, the message was everywhere, from morning news shows to viral TikToks. And just a week later, Washington issued a new requirement for Canadians staying more than 30 days. Visitors now had to register with authorities and provide fingerprints. For millions of casual tourists, it felt like being treated as suspects. The backlash was swift. As trust fractured, travel agencies across Canada saw a flood of cancellations. But travelers weren't staying home. They were choosing new destinations, places that didn't feel like crossing a line. Mexico, the Caribbean, and Europe surged in popularity, with some operators reporting a 30% jump in demand. Canadians were moving on and taking their wallets with them. That shift was clearly reflected in new data. Statistics Canada recorded a sharp drop in returning air passengers in April and May, down 14% and 24.2% respectively. It wasn't about a single decision. It was the result of mounting frustrations, rising tariffs, tighter visa rules, and stories of detentions making headlines back home. Border reported sales dropping by up to half between January and April. In total, more than 20 million Canadians, who once made up a quarter of all international visitors to the U.S., have been pulling back. Now, terminals once brimming with movement are growing quieter by the day. The optimism that marked early travel recovery has faded, replacing it empty seats and a creeping sense that something larger is unraveling. But Canada is only one piece of the puzzle. Across the Atlantic, another shift is underway, and it's hitting even harder. By the end of May, flights arriving from Europe had dropped sharply, down 17% from the previous year. Flights that once had waiting lists and full cabins were now taking off half empty. The decline wasn't gradual, it was sudden, and it rattled the industry. Bloomberg reported that bookings for July transatlantic flights were down another 13%. Airlines were being forced to lower fares to levels not seen since the height of the pandemic. Some Paris to New York tickets were being sold at prices that hadn't been seen since 2020. But it wasn't about affordability. Travelers were hesitating for deeper reasons. European news outlets ran frequent stories about Americans tightening immigration rules. Reports of aggressive screenings, surprise interrogations, and long hours at immigration checkpoints dominated headlines. Travelers shared their stories online, some frustrated, some shaken. As the stories spread, so did the fear. Hotels that once banked on steady summer crowds were now scrambling to fill rooms. Manhattan, Miami Beach, Los Angeles, they all felt the pressure. Hotels across America have slashed their prices by as much as 40%. But guess what? Rooms are still sitting empty. Even with massive discounts, tourists just aren't coming like they used to. And it's not just hotels feeling the pain. Restaurants, tour operators, cab drivers, everyone connected to the tourism machine is hurting right now. This drop isn't just a bad season. It's part of a much larger shift. Cities that depend heavily on foreign tourists, especially those who tend to spend more, are seeing their budgets tighten. Museums, Broadway shows, amusement parks, places that usually thrive on international foot traffic are facing smaller crowds and thinner profits. There's an opinion among economists that if this trend continues, we could see widespread layoffs in hospitality and entertainment sectors. These aren't temporary side effects. According to experts, this may be the new reality. Travelers from Europe, for instance, are increasingly choosing destinations where they feel more welcome and where travel procedures are smoother. That means fewer flights to the US, fewer dollars spent here, and less visibility for American cities on the global map. According to analysts, this drop in international interest could lead to a long-term loss of influence and reputation for the US as a premier tourist destination. And here's a striking image: empty American airports. It's not just a few cities struggling. This trend is showing up across the entire country. From coast to coast, major airports are reporting fewer international passengers. The TSA checkpoint data tells the story. Since 2021, screenings were growing steadily. But in spring 2025, that upward curve took a dive. For the first time in years, total screenings over a 3-month stretch dropped below the numbers from the previous year. And no, it's not a seasonal dip. What changed? Well, on April 11th, a new policy kicked in. Any foreign visitor planning to stay more than 30 days now has to register and submit fingerprints. That alone was enough to make many travelers rethink their plans. It's possible that this added bureaucracy, combined with the timing of Canada's travel advisory against the US, created a perfect storm. Bookings from Western Europe plummeted. Canadian cancellations surged. Airports that had just begun to recover from pandemic-era slumps found themselves empty again. There is a version that this could cause long-term damage to the airline industry, particularly for international carriers relying on transatlantic routes. And speaking of transatlantic flights, by the time summer rolled in, prices had been slashed in half. Not because airlines wanted to offer great deals, but because they were desperate to fill seats on half-empty planes. Let's zoom in on Las Vegas for a moment. The city known for glitz and nonstop tourism is now seeing a visible fallout. In May 2025, visitor numbers fell by 6.5%. That marks 5 straight months of decline. Just take a walk along the Strip. Casino floors have open seats. Restaurants aren't bustling like before. And hotel prices that used to skyrocket are now being cut in hopes of attracting anyone at all. Even with these discounts, many tourists are staying away. A recent report went so far as to call Vegas outrageously overpriced, blaming rising resort fees and inflated restaurant menus. For years, Vegas could charge whatever it wanted because the demand was there. That leverage is quickly slipping away. According to tourism consultants, if this pricing model doesn't change, Vegas could lose its position as the entertainment capital of the world. Travelers might start seeing better value elsewhere. But cost isn't the only issue. The political atmosphere in the US is also turning people off. From new visa procedures to trade tensions, the international community is feeling uncertain about visiting. For a city like Vegas, where tourism isn't just a part of the economy, it is. Let's start with something that's hard to ignore. A massive travel boycott from Canada is already hitting the US economy where it hurts. Nearly 50% of Canadians reported canceling or postponing their trips to the United States this year. That's not just a small dip in numbers. That's a staggering $3 billion Canadian dollars potentially lost. Air travel from Canada to the US dropped by 40% compared to the same period last year. Imagine half your neighborhood suddenly deciding not to cross the street to your store anymore. What happens? Revenue crashes, jobs are lost, and your storefront might not survive the season. According to tourism analysts, this isn't just a phase. It could reshape Canada travel dynamics for years. Airlines may cut routes. U.S. towns near the border, once dependent on Canadian shoppers and weekenders, could face closures. It's possible this could even spill into trade relationships and cross-border economic ties. And it's not just Canada. The United States is the only G20 country projected to see a drop in tourism revenue in 2025. Everyone else is growing. Meanwhile, U.S. inbound tourism is expected to fall by 6.9%, slashing nearly $12.5 billion from the economy. The U.S. Travel Association already warned that this kind of decline could delay the country's tourism recovery by at least 4 more years. That means cities like New York, Miami, and San Francisco, once global tourist hotspots, might struggle to return to their pre-2020 glory. Experts say this could force tourism-dependent businesses to shut down or cut staff. It could also pressure states to slash budgets for things like culture, local events, and even public services, which often rely on taxes from tourism. Let's look at the numbers more closely. In March 2025, compared to the same month last year, the drop in tourist arrivals from major countries was severe. Germany minus 28%, Spain minus 25%, UK minus 18%, Canada minus 17%, South Korea minus 15%, and Australia minus 7%. The total decline in international arrivals was 11.6%. That's not just statistics. It's an empty restaurant in New York that used to serve Germans every summer. It's a Broadway show playing to half the seats because the tourists who would have filled them stayed home. And experts say these declines aren't accidental. They're pointing to growing perceptions of the U.S. as unwelcoming, expensive, and even unsafe. There is an opinion that this negative image could lead travelers to choose alternative destinations like Japan, Portugal, or Thailand instead, countries that are actively promoting themselves as affordable, safe, and open to the world. One surprising bright spot: Australians. Travel from Australia to the U.S. is actually up by 4.8% this year, and in May alone, bookings were up 8%. But there's a catch. Australians are traveling more in general. Travel from Australia to Japan is up 32%, and to Vietnam by 25%. The U.S. is gaining some Aussie travelers, yes, but not as many as it could. According to economists, the U.S. is losing its competitive edge. Once seen as the dream vacation, it's now just one option among many, and often not the best value. Without adjusting pricing, policies, and its international image, the U.S. could keep losing even loyal travelers like Australians. Now, let's talk about a big change that stirred up international headlines: the introduction of a $250 visa integrity fee for many travelers. Non-ESTA visitors now have to pay this fee on top of the regular visa cost. Even those using the Visa Waiver Program, ESTA, saw their fee double from $21 to $40. Here's the thing. Travelers aren't just paying for flights and hotels. They're now hit with what feels like a penalty just to enter the U.S. If you're a family of 4 from Brazil or South Africa, this could be hundreds of extra dollars before your vacation even begins. According to travel industry insiders, these added costs might drive away budget-conscious travelers and discourage group travel, especially from emerging economies. There is a version that this could result in fewer cultural exchanges, fewer students visiting the U.S., and a growing sense that America is closing its doors to the world. But the issues go beyond cost. The U.S. has also ramped up border screening measures. New policies include fingerprinting for all visitors staying longer than 30 days, deep inspection of phones and laptops at the border, and monitoring of visitors' social media activity. Sounds intense, right? Several European governments have issued formal advisories warning their citizens that they could be detained at U.S. borders for reasons like unclear travel intentions or suspicious digital activity. Imagine being a young artist from France traveling to LA for a month and getting stopped because you tweeted something sarcastic last year. This is the kind of scenario people are worried about. Legal experts and civil rights groups are already raising alarms. There's a belief that if this trend continues, it might reduce academic and professional exchanges, as fewer international students, researchers, and creatives feel comfortable visiting the U.S. In the long term, it could weaken the U.S.'s soft power, its influence through culture, education, and diplomacy. All of this is happening as the U.S. gears up to host some of the biggest global events of the decade. The 2026 FIFA World Cup, America's 250th birthday celebrations, and the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles are expected to draw millions. But here's the big question. If current travel trends continue, will anyone show up? According to event planners and economic analysts, the U.S. risks missing out on billions in tourist revenue if it doesn't reverse these trends in time. Infrastructure may be ready, but empty hotel rooms and underfilled stadiums could be a real embarrassment on the world stage. And it's not just about money or reputation. A decline in global visitors means fewer opportunities for cultural exchange, collaboration, and shared progress. When people stop visiting a country, they also stop understanding it, and that distance can lead to long-term diplomatic tension or mistrust. Now, you might be wondering, are there places doing it better? Yes. Japan, Portugal, Italy, Thailand, and even Turkey are all investing heavily in tourism outreach. They're offering streamlined visa processes, incentives for digital nomads, and enhanced safety guarantees. Meanwhile, the U.S. is moving in the opposite direction. Experts from the World Travel and Tourism Council point out that if these trends continue, the U.S. could lose its position as a top global destination, falling behind not just in visitor numbers, but in cultural influence and global image. Even within the U.S., some local tourism boards are frustrated. Cities like Chicago and San Diego are pushing for more relaxed policies and better marketing strategies to regain foreign visitors, especially from Europe and Asia. There's a growing internal conflict between federal policies and local needs. According to analysts, if this divide deepens, we might see more U.S. states and cities lobbying for tourism independence, perhaps even creating their own mini-visa programs or entry perks to attract travelers. So where does that leave us? It's a complex moment. The U.S., once the undisputed dream destination for millions, is facing a critical image problem. Some of it is policy-driven, some of it economic, and some of it perception. But the numbers don't lie. International travelers are going elsewhere. And while certain markets, like Australia, are still showing interest, the broader trend is clear. People are choosing destinations that feel more welcoming, more affordable, and more respectful of their privacy and personal freedoms. The consequences could be wide-ranging, from lost revenue and job cuts to a decline in cultural influence and innovation. If fewer students and professionals visit the U.S., fewer global ideas flow through American institutions. If fewer tourists come, fewer stories are shared about the beauty and diversity of the U.S. Will these trends reverse? Can the U.S. rebuild its global image as a welcoming, world-class travel destination? That's the big question. Because if not, according to experts in the industry, we might be looking at the slow decline of a tourism empire that once led the world.